trickled in, so I should pivot to actually talking to what everybody here came to see. So I'll go ahead and get started. So good morning, folks. Will McPhee, System Support, President of Managed IT Services, waking up here a little bit for a late June day. But today's presentation, as Ryan and I were slowly transitioned from talking about the weather into talking a little bit about AI agents at a real high level, as we're talking about what it is that we use them for, it's important for an organization to have a governance document that talks about how the AI can be used, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, so that as staff members, as your users and staff start to use AI a little bit more in the business, that you've sat down, thought about, and put in writing and guardrails what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. I know, speaking at a really high level, how AI has been pushed out to a lot of staff members is I've seen the gambit. I've seen what we do internally, which is I pay for a corporate subscription, and System Support owns that subscription, and all that flows through ours, and I, as an administrator, have control of who has access to what. I've seen other organizations say, we're not going to pay for it. The employee has to pay for it, but then register it through their corporate email. So there's a degree of kind of half and half control, which is difficult. And then there are ones that haven't touched it, but it's obvious that the staff, I mean, I would be baffled if the staff wasn't actually using it in their day-to-day work. So I think it's important you lay down what it is that you intend. It's a living, breathing document. It becomes similar to the acceptable use policy of what you're allowed to do on your work computer. Do you really want folks using their work computer to perform personal banking, check personal email, keep their personal tax returns on? Probably not. You want work used for work. So this is the same type of document that helps line out that, hey, your work AI tool is for work. You're not to build whatever it is at home. So today's roadmap, we're going over why policies matter and restricted uses, the data protection, some common pitfalls, and some action plans and next steps. So I don't think it's any question of if AI is already in the business. Chances are folks are already using it in some way, shape, or form. It's been ubiquitous in the news. I mean, if you do a Google search, the first result is now an AI summary from Gemini. AI is already kind of out there and using it. And I wouldn't be surprised if, there's free versions from Microsoft that Microsoft has been pushing into a whole bunch of different tools. So really overwhelmingly, it's not how do we use it safely? Because as you can see, already there's a ton of tools that probably have snuck in without, have already snuck in without somebody already talking about it. Great examples like there's OpenAI, there's CapCut, there's Gemini, there's Copilot, Notebook LM is a part of Gemini, Claude, Canva. There's already an overwhelming use. And as we see with when folks sign up for other types of software apps, it's the same thing, just accelerated faster. The shadow IT, these services and platforms that you don't control, it can create risk. But as you set the rules of how you're supposed to use it, you can really lock in what's okay, what's not okay, and then everybody's on the same page. So an acceptable use policy, it's really just putting in writing what you want. So you define the approved tools in the business use cases. You can use Copilot for writing our blogs. You can use Canva for creating our social media posts. You can use Claude for reviewing insurance documents. You can use Copilot to take scanned PDFs and create an Excel table. You don't have to get that granular, but it starts to put together this is okay, this is not okay. You want to identify those data categories, how they interact with AI. So some of this is thinking about the gazins and the gazouts of your company. Emails is a data category, attachments, spreadsheets, financial contracts. How far do you want the data to go? What do you want to touch to it? And then especially anything you are having someone do an AI generated, make a human review requirement and put a checklist to it for what, if someone is using the AI to do their job, put a checklist next to it for what needs to be completed, thinking in the terms of social media posts. You don't want to have social media posts generated for maybe it pulls information from testimonials on your website and it uses someone who hasn't worked with you in 10 years. And maybe in reality, you didn't leave on the best terms. So maybe there's a checklist for, hey, there's a human checklist before that social media goes out, and you have proof that the human actually checked it instead of the, yeah, should be good, just go for it. And granted, we fall into that same trap, even if we had an intern or a virtual assistant where we might endorse something faster than we really should. Make it really clear about how new tools get approved and integrated. Hey, we're going to standardize on Copilot. We're going to standardize on ChatGPT. We're going to standardize on Claude. And that way, for the company, you not only make sure that the data is protected the right way, but you're also not spending on a bunch of redundant subscriptions. Like, awesome, this person has a Claude subscription and a Copilot and a ChatGPT subscription with no clear business reason as to why they have all three. And then also, you can't just sign them up for the AI and say, here, sign this document, say that happened. Sit down, do the training, view how you're going to enforce it, and make sure that there's somebody who has ownership at each step. And that all comes into a nice little 10-page document for the do's, the don'ts, the inventory, and how we review it, and put that into the employee handbook. So, as I just mentioned, for it being a 10-page document, that can be a little overwhelming. You don't want to approve a tool in isolation, but at the same time, you don't want to try and, build the cathedral before you really have the congregation. Just start with a few of the business use cases that you want to use. Where are people doing really repetitive things? Repetitive drafting of an email, summarizing, organizing, research work that if I was going to work on this spreadsheet, I'm going to be doing the same things every time. A great example for us is analyzing our marketing costs. Every time that we track where leads come in from. We know, I go to the QuickBooks. QuickBooks has the expenses organized in the profit and loss. So how do I take what's in the profit and loss and compare it to the leads that come in and what the spend is between it? I mean, it's all very easy to do across 3 spreadsheets. It takes about 30 minutes of formatting, cutting it, copy, paste, etc. But it's repetitive. It's important, but AI is really good at taking those spreadsheets, chopping it up, and moving with it. So if there's something repetitive you're already doing, that's a great start. The other place to think about for other business use cases is, who's already touching it? Who in your organization is already talking a lot about what it is that they're doing for experimenting with AI, already using it? They're already saying maybe they mentioned something they did at home. They might be a good champion to start with as well. What features might be embedded in the tools you already use? Is there something that I know for one of our clients, they use Bluebeam a lot in the construction industry, and they have Bluebeam subscriptions. Bluebeam has an AI add-on that could help with a couple things that are in there. Is there already something that's an easy, just add it to, like, yes, we endorse Bluebeam Max as a subscription to help with, help with whatever. But, these are the things that make me nervous that I want a human to review. You just capture that in writing. The big one, which processes always require human judgment? HR is a great one to make sure there's always a human judgment, especially when the consequences get bigger and bigger, or you have anything that is public facing. Do I want to have an AI level 1 technician for responding to service requests? Yeah, I mean, it'd be great. Have a little AI agent just handle the help, I'm locked out, help install this printer. But also, nothing is more frustrating than sending a service request in and you get an AI answer that has absolutely nothing to do. Or worse, it just sends you a how-to article instead of actually doing the job. I'm looking at you, Field Edge, but hey, what always needs a human to take a look at it? But could incoming ticket triage be handled by an AI? Yeah, who has the least amount of tickets? Give them the ticket. They seem to be free. What client was this for? What's the urgency based on the language? Some of those things are pretty easy to, it's not rocket surgery to butcher a joke for, figuring out which is, really important, but maybe doing the work is still full human judgment. And that kind of ties into that, hey, what really makes customer risk, legal risk, financial risk, cybersecurity risk, or reputational risk if AI strikes out there? Where do you need something to bat 99% of the time versus 80% of the time? As those 99s should be the humans. So, we've gone over folks that may already be using it, repetitive things that you have to do Monday at 9 a.m. that you're never really a fan of, financial reports that you have to have somebody pull and is a real pain to get the data out. So you've gotten some ideas of where it may actually be used. So, all right, what's allowed? What's a very easy, low lift? You are allowed to use AI as you're drafting this, telling your employees how to use it. Internal automation for low risk workflows. Again, that incoming ticket triage is an easy one. Public research and information gathering, that's a great one. Hey, I'm meeting with the following prospect. Can the AI give me a couple notes about what's publicly available about this person, rather than having to sit down and Google. And then it makes a nice little summary document as you go to talk to them as, oh, hey, I saw you did this recently, etc. Marketing content with review, I leave that one to Ryan. Grammar, spelling, and tone assistant is easy. And non-sensitive summaries for looking at something that's, not really an entirely, that's not going into some form of public record or something really sensitive if you're summarizing it up. So it's those low risk, easy, repetitive, you don't want to do them. Those are easy permitted use. And I'm sure everyone on the call has a few ideas of like, yeah, this is something I have to do on a regular basis that it'd be much better if this was just automated in some way, shape, or form. And then on the flip side, some prohibited use examples. Is there a confidential or regulated data? Hey, if maybe you're an accountant, maybe you don't want to be uploading folks' tax documents to, ChatGPT for public models. There's a lot of stuff that says, hey, if you have the paid version of the tools, if you have the paid version for the tools, yeah, sure, it doesn't use it to train the model, but you really can't put health information, social security numbers, tax returns, all the fun stuff. Not a good idea to put it in the public tools. Do not have it make a legal compliance or an HR decision without some form of review. It can help you if you get a giant contract, give you some, you get this 25-page monstrosity and say, can you help me summarize this? What are the key points that I need to further review it? What needs further attention? Are there any gotchas that I'm not aware of? What's the term of this? When's the renewal date? It's kind of intern level questions for it. You can ask it, but don't have it say like, is this contract good for us? Don't leave that to the human. Purchases, emails, system changes, or deployments is a big one. I mean, would you hire an intern, give them a month of training, and then have them talking direct to your clients with absolutely no oversight? Probably not. Don't bring personal or an unapproved AI tool for company work. Hey, all right, we standardized on Copilot because I want everything to live in Microsoft 365. Awesome. Hey, why is Jimmy using Claude? There's a whole bunch of stuff going on Claude. Is that a paid version? If he's developing things for the company that turns out Jimmy is really helping with some other automations or other report building, turns out we have control of none of that. Not a good look. And then it kind of goes without saying is just, hey, no, the deceptive, discriminatory impersonation content, don't use it to make deep fakes of other people. Obviously we use it for some internal video things, but Ryan's not allowed to take the script for what I have there and then have me say a whole bunch of very nasty things about the city of New York or something, or worse. I could have it bash on the Yankees or something, but I'd much rather get in trouble for doing that myself anyway. So. But you want to protect the data first. So yeah, this honestly is the most important section. Just put out in no uncertain terms for your employees, hey, you cannot put personally identifiable information up in there. No social security numbers, bank account numbers, no health information, can't put their credit cards or bank accounts, anything that's a private contract you don't want up there unless you are building out and explicitly saying, hey, I need an area of a vendor contract review to see if anything is conflicting with what we've agreed to in certain places, but be really explicit about it. don't put, this is if you're actually building software, source code, credentials, do not put logins. And I'm sure folks have seen crazy stuff about Hermes agent or OpenClaw agent or anything like that, but don't give it logins to things that it shouldn't have. Don't put network diagrams that would allow someone to figure out how to move around your office or any type of strategic plans, again, unless it's very explicitly approved. So it could be, I'll use the contracts one because maybe you've got a whole bunch of different contracts to figure out, doing a review of internal renewals of when different softwares renew or something like that, or even for client reviews. You want to be really explicit, say, hey, these contracts are going to be entered in the system so that, we have a knowledge base article, we have a knowledge chat tool internal that allows us to tell us, is that covered under the client's contract or not? But just making sure you're very explicit that that contract is in an internal tool. Ask if you're doing any form of model training. The idea being whatever AI you use, chances are if you don't pay for it, you are the product, meaning whatever you're providing and getting back is training data. Again, if you use the paid models, you are not the training data. It pretty explicitly says, your data is not used to train the model, which is great. Be extra explicit of where your data is stored, who can access it, and the ability to review admin controls and audit logs, so that it's great to have folks sign a piece of paper that they're going to use it a certain way, but you have the ability to inspect that they are actually using it that way. And hopefully this is nothing new for a lot of folks, but being able to have good training for employees to recognize sensitive data before they go tearing off down the street. So if you're not sure about a given policy, the number one question is, would this hurt my business if it was leaked? If it turns out that this was posted up on Reddit or Facebook or Instagram, how bad would this hurt my company if that made it out there? If you're doing public research on a prospect, probably not. And most folks are going to say like, yep, that's sales 101. But, hey, your actual sensitive contract published publicly for how something works, probably not a good idea. So now that we kind of understand what should be, we want to protect the data, we want to understand where it goes, and we want to understand the guardrails around it. As we've talked about before, you want that inventory list. Hey, what's the list of the ones that we approve? What are the ones that are okay? Track the tool name, the business owner, approved use cases, and allowed data types. And you don't have to be super specific here. Usually the don't is a little easier than the do. So it could be ChatGPT, business owner, the principal is the one who owns it. Approved use cases are, low-level admin tasks with the following as strictly prohibited, no PII, no EPHI, no negotiation response without explicit human review with concurrence internally. And, you can upload Excel sheets, Word documents, PDFs, etc. Whether the tool has business licensing, admin controls, logging, retention, training, opt-outs. And chances are for a lot of these tools, most of it, if you already have a software inventory, these are easy add-ons of like, okay, because every software package now is slapping some form of AI tool on top of it, right? It seems to be if some software wants to stay competitive these days, they're adding these AI tools to stay competitive. So you can probably just start with what softwares you're consistently using, and you can put quickly of, licensing is per user, so we have some admin controls and logging. Retention isn't too much of a problem, and training opt-out is probably buried somewhere in there. License that for the license for your usage of it. And then some of the like go-to ones, again, as I mentioned, for a lot of software platforms, you could probably just list embedded features in. If you use 365, Copilot's there. There's no getting around it. Google Workspace, Gemini's there. Your CRM probably starting to launch one. Phone system starting to launch AI summaries, and there might even be a call reception agent coming soon. Marketing platforms, they might have it. Zoom, Zoom AI meeting assistant, and some security tools have it as well. Like for example, our security incident event manager has a little AI summary piece that it's supposed to inform the text to be able to look in additional places, but it doesn't make the call of whether something was okay or not. And then also, reviewing vendors and third parties that may use AI with your data. And this is still a very new Wild West. We are still working on our master services agreement to talk about how we use AI internally, especially through ticketing systems, remote monitoring management, and security tools. Because this technology is so unbelievably new, documentation port hasn't really gotten there yet. But an acceptable use policy can help you that for some of those vendors that touch your data, you maybe want to see if they have some form of stuff for that. So, being perfectly transparent with us, it's coming soon. Waiting for the attorney to get back to me. So, and then it begs the question of whether she's using AI or not. So, it becomes an Ouroboros that eats itself. So, like an example, for us, really easy built one. We have Copilot, we own it. It's the idea is I'm the business owner for it. It's easy to use for drafting summaries, data analysis. We limit it. ChatGPT Enterprise, good for marketing, content creation, Zoom AI, the summary of the different meetings, and then Grammarly Business for helping draft tone in your emails. So this is an example of a quick approved tool list. And ironically, you can use AI to build this pretty quickly. Speaking of which, the approval process for approving an AI tool, you don't have to be a genius or a tech wizard for doing this. It's very similar to how most places already have the, hey, I want this new piece of software and can I use it? So this really is nothing too new. Employer department submits a tool request and business need. I need Claude and here's why. Chances are if it's a well-known public tool, it's not something brand new, a Chrome extension with only 15 downloads. IT is going to say, yep, it's ChatGPT. Yep, it's Claude. Yep, it's Copilot. Nothing really there. If you do handle a lot of sensitive information, does the does the attorney maybe have some feelings about it that may affect the insurance company? Might be worth a pass. If it's marketing content, probably not. If it's drafting, if it's summaries, probably not. But if you're using it to make certain sensitive decisions, maybe the attorney wants to know, and subsequently the insurance company wants to know. Then leadership approves it for, what's the risk and how much is it going to cost and who's in charge, and then add it to the inventory list. So it's added to the approved list, and then the employee is off to the races. And you do want to keep it easy because these tools are made to make their lives easier. And with any type of software tool, if the process becomes onerous, the employee will just skirt it because they want to get their job done and the tool seems something cool. So if that whole process takes months, which really it should be like a day and a half at most, and most of it's going to be waiting for this guy to get back to you, it should move unbelievably quickly through the process. Now comes the giant red warning. Here is the risk checklist for common AI platforms. You can even see the
ominous red glow on my face.
Yes. This is the part where we use the strong colors to really hammer home the points of where to tread, because I think the benefits of it cannot be overstated. Well, the benefits of it speak to itself to a certain degree. I think they can be overstated, but it is also important to really highlight the danger of where to tread carefully. The automobile is an incredible invention and an incredible device, but you got to wear your seatbelt and you got to drive safe and you can't be impaired while driving. And these are the big important things you got to care about when using the thing that truly does make your life a lot easier and a lot better. Don't assume AI is not being used because nobody formally approved it. Ignorance is not bliss. Chances are ChatGPT or one of those other publicly available tools is being used out there. Don't stick with vague language of like use AI responsibly. Kind of hitting home on the driving impaired point, sure, the law requires Budweiser to put at the end of their ads, drink responsibly, but what does that mean? Well, Massachusetts has a lot of laws around tip certification for bartenders, limits of drink, there's blood alcohol level content. There's a whole list of things that go in for what responsibly should mean. And it's up to us as the business owners and the organization to put into a degree of writing for what that looks like. Don't treat every tool the same. Free public, Gemini use is not the same as a paid ChatGPT subscription, which is not the same as the AI that gets bolted on to Zoom, which is not the same as a model that you have built, that you downloaded locally on a server in your office. You have to look at the tool for what it's capable of, and they get sorted pretty quickly. You know, free public ones, yeah, it'd be the same as a Google search. I don't care if my Google search is, well, depends on what you are searching on Google on your own private on your computer. But again, this is a work computer and nothing's private, versus, is something a little more sensitive. I wouldn't want someone in my SharePoint site versus, all right, this does handle sensitive financial information. We really want to have something that's high horsepowered, and we do need a private internal model. All those have different risks, capabilities, and costs, and you cannot treat them all the same. They're all very different animals. Don't forget the little things, the plugins, the browser extensions, the meeting summaries, and vendor AI use. You signed up for Otter AI and forgot about it. And it turns out that it's been hopping on your Teams and Zoom calls without you realizing, and now you have a whole bunch of transcripts of private conversations sitting out somewhere. Could be an add-in that, maybe an add-in through Amazon got added that you weren't fully aware of. Those little things can stack up. Don't skip the human review. Really, management review. This is really no different than if you had hired interns or a whole bunch of virtual assistants. There's a degree of wanting to make sure there are controls and concurrence before it gets somewhere. And the human review is no different than reviewing that junior employee or virtual assistant or executive assistant content. So the human review is still necessary before it starts flying out. And then don't create the policy, handle it out, say good luck, go forth, be productive, do some training, do some controls, do some enforcement. Could be as simple as a lunch and learn for saying, hey, we're going out to lunch this day. Want to talk about the AI use. I know it's been a sprinkled use, but we're coming together on a formal policy, and here's how I want you guys to use it. And then maybe you have a great conversation that's back and forth. Maybe you have that first, and that informs the policy where the folks are like, hey, I really do want to use this because it helps me do that. So, single employee decision tree for a simple employee decision tree for 1 minute check before using it. Is the tool approved? Is it my paid ChatGPT subscription? Is it my Copilot subscription? Is it my Claude subscription? Awesome. Is the data sensitive? Is it a bank account? Is it financial? Is it secret legal? Is it trade secrets on how the Coca-Cola or the Kentucky Fried Chicken is made? Is it truly sensitive? Is a human going to review this output? Am I going to see what comes out of it and then review it before I go forth and send it to a client or make another decision? And then, is this going to affect the customer? For example, are they going to get billed when they shouldn't get billed? Is an employee's, performance going to be affected as part of it? Could there be legal ramifications? Could there be a financial ramification? Or, could the public suddenly change how they feel about us? So when in doubt, stop, think, ask, review. Stop, don't post the data. Ask IT or data security compliance or a manager of just, hey, I was thinking about this, but I just need a second pair of eyes on what this is. And that just takes that whole long acceptable use policy that you have and just turns it into a 4 quick question. STAR is a good one. STAR came from my time in the nuclear world. Before you go to change something and touch a valve. STAR, how to get employees to follow it. So social proof is a wonderful thing. Show that everybody is following them, make it part of the culture. And then if you are at top, you have to set an example. You can't bypass the controls. You can't constantly change and have a lot of, you could do that. No, you can't do that. No, that's not right. Yes, this is right. Put some thought into it. Pick the one, set the tone, highlight when other people follow the tone, really make it a part of it follows closely with the cybersecurity culture of the, trust but verify. Really follows in nicely with that. Clear, concise, simple language of real examples, especially the acceptable use policies are better if it maps to something that the employee knows that they're doing day to day. Like, oh yeah, no, I get it. I know that report. Yeah, that thing is a pain in the ass. That thing, yeah, AI could cut it from 45 minutes to 5. That's awesome. Training and awareness, make sure that there are clear escalations of when in doubt, ask this person. Only the approved tools. Make sure there are access controls for how folks can get in and out. Make sure there's a degree of monitoring and a degree of accountability of, hey, that if someone does maybe fire off an email without looking through what the AI had written, make real consequences. And it'd be the same thing as if somebody typed something up and it was like, you shouldn't have sent that to a client. That was absolutely out of bounds. And then again, just hammering home, you got to do what you say. So this isn't something to do in a day. This isn't something I wouldn't want people to do in a day. But for a 30-day sprint, and week one, go through the discovery, look at what AI tools you're currently using. Maybe some of them are in the softwares you already have. What are the softwares you use every day? What is some sensitive data, and where do you think your company has the highest risk? In the second week, start drafting, defining the permitted uses, prohibited uses, data safeguards, and approval workflows. Ironically, you can use AI to take your inventory and start drafting the language around it. Now, don't just use it and be like, yep, I don't have to think about this. Read what's generated and make sure that it actually hammers home to what it is that you do. So you can have that draft to go through, review, pass around to employees. Maybe somebody says, hey, wait a minute, I wanted to use it for X. Internally figure out what it is that you want to do. In the review phase of week 3, involve those external stakeholders now that the document's further along. Get IT involved. Hey, we're thinking about doing this for this. What does the subscription cost and controls and signups look like for that? Hey, insurance company and legal counsel, we're thinking of using this. Are there any risks and things that you can think of that maybe you want to have us walk back on because, hey, insurance companies haven't caught up for this? And then for week 4, have that formal launch, train the employees, publish the tool list, collect any acknowledgments for folks signed, and then schedule a review a couple months down the road to make sure it's doing what you need to do it. So the parting questions to ask. So if you get nothing out of my rambling for the past 35 minutes, these are the things to really walk away with. What tools are employees using today? You looked around the office, who has a ChatGPT bookmark on their computer? Who's using Claude? Who has a Copilot thing up? Who's using Canva? What are you already seeing there? What company data absolutely should never touch an AI tool for financial, credit cards, anything along those lines? Who's going to be in charge of approving something new that comes in? IT is an easy one. But ultimately, who at the business, IT could say, yeah, sure, use it. It's fantastic. But who at the business wants to have the cost that comes along with it? And then which are the ones that you absolutely have to have a human review? How will employees report mistakes, risky uses, or policy questions when they stop and have a question? How does the employee raise their hand and go like, wait a minute, I don't understand? Same way that if you had a manager telling you to do something or given something and say, wait a minute, that's not right. How do you have that review cycle or that iteration cycle? And then how often are you going to review the policy and tool list? Things are moving really fast right now. I would recommend maybe a monthly, bi-monthly, or quarterly review to start. And then perhaps as the landscape starts to slow down, an annual review would be fine. But who knows? Maybe by the time we get to a quote, it slows down, it's a whole new landscape. So we'll see. So in closing, AI is an incredible productivity advantage when it is governed like a business system instead of a Wild West. It's the same way of having strong, structured processes and procedures within your business. Just instead of human beings opening a spreadsheet, clicking and dragging, editing, doing whatever, the machine can do it to get to the point that the information can then be actioned upon. It's an incredible productivity advantage, but like anything else that employees are working on, it needs clear policies, procedures, and processes. Clear rules for tools, data, decisions, and human review. Clear, it doesn't have to be complicated, it just has to be clear of just, hey, there's AI generated content can't be emailed to a client without one other human review. The approval path, make it easier than just the user taking a credit card, signing it up for themselves and just saying like, I'm using my personal email to sign up for my own ChatGPT to get the thing done. Review the policy as things change, and things change quickly. So this is why it needs to be simple and concise, just so you can take one look at it and go, yep, maybe some news comes out about Claude for what the Mythos or the Fable 5 model is then capable of, and you go, no, and you need to walk that back to do something different. Maybe there's a certain, maybe all of a sudden ChatGPT changes how the usage is going to be priced, and it turns from a flat monthly rate to a usage base. And you go, hold on, I do not need a new electric bill. I have no idea. My employees love to leave the lights on, and I do not need like the equivalent of a crazy Eversource bill, down the road. So reviewing that and watching as those updates come in is important. And then, this is for safe use of an incredible technology. Again, hammering home for, the car and the automobile is an incredible technology when used safely. They don't need to be scared away by it. They just need the appropriate guardrails. And the document should be a living, breathing animal, should be reviewed time to time, and just something that everybody's on the bus for how things should be used. So that is everything for today. I know that was a lot. And also, too, we have some templates for working through AI acceptable use policies if folks need help with it for, hey, I'm not sure where to start. But with that, are there any questions that folks may have out there? There should be a chat button down below for, you can also raise your hand as well.
It's usually one of those things where there's a lot thrown at you real quick. We'll have the recap and we'll have a version of the checklist that sort of helps you worksheet some of this going out in an email once they're posted.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everybody. I hope this was informative today. I think this is going to be really important going forward, as the tools are already ubiquitous. So just have to keep it going. Yeah. Thank you, and have a fantastic day, everybody.